Hang on.
Here.
Right. So just let me do a little bit. I'll just do a little bit of presentation. So
Okay.
welcome to Community Actions Lunch and Learn sessions. The aim of these sessions is to present to you the numerous voluntary support organisations and groups that we have here on the Isle of Wight that help people with health and mental health issues. The first part of the session is recorded, as I already said, and afterwards the recording will be available on our Community Action website. I will put the link in the chat section as we go along. You're welcome to keep your cameras off. After the presentation, we will be an opportunity to have a chat with the presenter, and this set part will not be recorded. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you to Barry, who's from the Alzheimer's Cafe.
Hi, folks. The cafe has been around for just over 12 years. And, you know, like lots of voluntary organisations, it's been ticking over. But the last couple of years has seen some quite significant moves and some exciting initiatives. And it's all been part of this regeneration of care that we've experienced here on the island. So what's a cafe? Well, first of all, if you're expecting to find chips and beans, you're going to be unlucky. The word cafe is used to give the impression that this is a place that is easily accessible. You can get up and you can go at any time. You can come in at any time. You can be relaxed. It's not formal. The only sort of hint of a uniform is the fact that each cafe has a colour. And you can see from the top left on the screen, the orange colour, which I thought should have been Newport, but they're all cows volunteers, so I might have got that wrong. I've got a red shirt on, and that is one of the that's the West Cows Cafe, and there's pink for Totland, yellow for Ryde, and various other places. So, what is a cafe then? Well, it's an important link between families and their search for information. And meet and greet is incredibly important because we work on a one-to-one, face-to-face basis, unlike a lot of other charities where you can phone up and get some information via the telephone. So having a knowledge of dementia and of how it progresses in the early stages and being able to talk about this with confidence is a very essential attribute for all volunteers. And each volunteer goes through a fairly rigorous training session. A little bit more about that later. Where have the cafes come from? Well, it's a Dutch concept originated by Dr. Beer Meissen, an old age psychiatrist, who recognized that people with dementia receive little or no guidance following their diagnosis. The first British cafe opened in Farnborough by Dr. Gemma Jones in 1997, and the first Isle of Wight cafe was opened by Maggie Bennett in 2011. There are currently 6 cafes that operate monthly, and a new one in the pipeline at Parklands, but more about that later, which is the latest initiative that will provide a daily cafe, a well-being and education centre in the former children's home at Parklands in Cowes. Oh, is where technology works or doesn't. Why can't I? Oh, yes. Oh, gosh, gone too far. That'll do. Technology and me don't really work. What makes them unique is the educational content of each of the meetings. Even today, there's very little support available following an initial GP diagnosis. And the actual diagnosis, as you probably know, comes in 2 halves. First one is the GP who establishes a probable diagnosis, and then that's backed up later by the memory clinic and a psychiatrist or their specialist nurse who will confirm the diagnosis. But there's currently a wait of about a year before the diagnosis that is initially carried out at GP level can actually be confirmed by the memory service. So what happens during that time? Well, hopefully this does. We operate the 6 cafes across the island, mainly because it was found that in the early days there was just nothing available, no support and no information. And having sort of gone through the process of caring myself, I recognise this because about 8 years ago, when I reached that point, there was virtually nothing apart from the Alzheimer cafes to turn to. I remember the GP patting me on my knee. I must stress here, it wasn't an Isle of Wight GP, it was on the mainland. And he said to me, Barry, right, there you go. And I said, well, that's fine. Thank you, doctor. Where? And he said, well, that's the problem, really, because there's nowhere that you can go, but I'm sure you'll cope. And that was the extent of the ongoing support that I had. And I was in a heck of a state. And I've seen that replicated time and time again in the intervening years. Just last week at Ryde, where one of our guests, I noticed, I was talking to her husband. She had the diagnosis and she was crying, quietly crying. And I said to her husband, I think you better go and see, we'll call her Mary, because she's obviously distressed. And he said, yes, she's so upset that she feels that she's letting me down. And I said, good heavens, we need a long talk, don't we? And that will be the start of the sort of support that we can give him. Nobody should feel undervalued to that extent. I was lost. I didn't know what to do, and nobody will give me an answer. Memory service in those days was brushed off its feet a bit like today, and just did not provide the support that I felt should be there. I was angry, and I see this anger in people who are family of people who've recently been diagnosed, even today, because we haven't got the joined upness that we're heading towards. Receiving an initial diagnosis by GP is recognition that memory problems exist. It doesn't do anything to allay the fear or indicate where support can be found. And it's a mixed blessing that indicates a future pathway, but omits any sort of signpost. And people come to the cafes for two things, basically. Well, three: knowledge, understanding, and general support. And I came across this this quote a couple of days ago: "Nothing in life is to be feared; it's only to be understood." And hey, that is important, and it sort of underpins much of the work that we do in the cafes, because we believe strongly in facing facts. We don't hold back. Obviously, we are very concerned about the language that we use, particularly if we know that within our group there's somebody who is feeling pretty fragile. But there's usually enough of us to offer the support and friendship that enables people to accept what we say. And acceptance is a major thing. But it's not just giving information, it's the environment that the information is given in, and the fact that the information that we give is accurate and appropriate. Because, medicine is something where there's often a sort of regular pathway. This is, you've got the spots, you're going to get the irritation next, and then you're going to get a headache and blah, blah, blah. There's a sort of pathway, but that isn't the case with dementia. Everybody is different. So you've got to be able to be aware of the whole toolbox that is available into which you can dip in and provide the support that is so necessary. But it's got to be good quality. And unfortunately, there are an awful lot of people who do what they think is best. And unfortunately, best is not always good enough. I remember looking, I was in a care home a few years ago, when an elderly lady had picked up the Christmas tree from the reception area and carried it into one of the lounges. And I said, oh, we'll call her Jean. I said, hi, Jean, that's a lovely Christmas tree, isn't it? And her eyes lit up and she said, oh, yes, I found it down there. And I just wanted to show everybody how nice it is. And I thought, oh, gosh, I know what's going to happen next. And sure enough, within a couple of seconds, one of the long-term care workers have been there, 15 years, came roaring up and said, what are you doing? That doesn't belong here. That belongs. And of course, the look on her face was enough to realise that had had a profound effect, and that wasn't the way to respond. That lady was looking for support and love and friendship, and what she got was quite the opposite. So sometimes what we do is inappropriate, not because we're not because we intend it to be, but because we don't know any better. So that's one of the reasons why we are very careful in what we say and in what we and how we say it. It's very, very important. Because when people are in that initial diagnosis stage, they're in the middle ground. They're halfway between the GP surgery and the specialist support they're going to get from the memory service. We operate a rolling program in the cafes linked to the daily challenges that carers and cared for are likely to experience whilst living in the community. This is our focus, community support. It's not the tip of the iceberg, which frequently is referred to in the models used by the medical profession, because they see the sharp end of dementia, and the majority of the people don't require the skill of that sort of support. All our volunteers are dementia aware. And most of them have got personal experience, and all of them have had specific training designed by Dr. Gemma Jones. And great care is taken to ensure that we use a common knowledge base and a common language, because that way we know that communication can be effective. And this is an example of a rolling program. Some elements there, which I can't see because the screen's obliterated, but they are things like, what is dementia? How is it diagnosed? Memory and attention, and the bookcase model, which is the analogy that we use to explain the early memory loss. And I remember the first time that I came across this analogy, it really was a light bulb moment. I thought to myself, wow, that explains so much. And I see this replicated time and time again with people. And often when we were doing a course with professional caregivers who maybe have been in care homes or in the domiciliary area for some years, they suddenly realize that there's the reasoning behind what's been puzzling them for a long time. And these light bulb moments are quite interesting to observe. The aging senses in normal aging and dementia, because clearly things slow down and drop off as we get older. So it's important to know what's going to happen to your body generally, and then on top of that, what's likely to be an additional cause of concern for when we're dealing with somebody with dementia. Fear and anger is really important, because when a person is fearful, and there are lots of reasons we won't go into now, but a person who is living with dementia is living for the day. They're not going to remember things from yesterday or from the past so much. So each day is going to be a whole selection of new experiences. And can you imagine what that would be like to suddenly be in a situation where, oh, that's new. You're not going to reason. You're not going to say that's new. It's just going to be presented to you. Then if you get frustrated, how do you sort of demonstrate frustration? Often it's through anger. And the number of times people have been labeled as being an aggressive person because their dementia has been at a stage when they've not been able to cope and they've experienced fear, and we've not always done enough to reduce that level of fear, and the anger's built up and built up, and it's become very difficult to to make that communication link. Effective communication. Never forget the time when I was doing some work for the CQC, being in a care home on the island, where an elderly lady who was close to the end of her journey, and whose son, a burly builder, as it turned out, from Ryde, was sat next to her, and I asked if I could come in and have a few words with him. He was in the bedroom with his mum, and he said, "Yeah, sure, come in. You know, well, that's all right." And I said, "Well, let's just run this past mum because she'll wonder what's going on." And he said, "Oh, no. She's been out of it for days. I've been here for almost a week, and I've got no link with her at all. I'm afraid we're close to the end." And I just said, "Well, humour me." And I took her, we'll call her Mary, took her by the hand, looked at her, and said, "I'm just going to have a few words with," called him Dave, "your son. I won't be long." And I thought I felt a tensioning in the hand, but I thought, no. I'm reading too much into this. Exchanged a few points of information with Dave. It's about medication, about general care and attitude towards him from the staff, blah, blah, blah. The sort of things that CQC dip into. And then at the end, I said, "Well, I'll leave you now, Dave, with mum." And I took her by both hands and I got down on my knees and I looked at her and I could see that she was looking at me, although I wasn't sure whether she had sight of me. And I said, "Mary, I'm going to go now. I've finished having a chat to your son. He's ever such a nice bloke, isn't he?" And she said yes. And I thought, "Oh, steady on, Jackman, or else you're going to blub in front of somebody and set a bad example." And David said, "How is it that you got mum to respond to you?" And I said, "It's not rocket science. She's in her early 90s. She's got poor sight. Hearing's not too good. But what she will recognize is the sound of your voice and probably the touch of your hands. So let's change places and let's see if you can make a connection." I don't recall whether the connection was remade, but it's not rocket science. That chap should have had an extra 3 or 4 days being able to connect with his mum. And this is the sort of thing that we can suggest as one of the tools in our toolbox when looking after people at that particular time. So it is important to get the communication right. And another one is stress and how it creeps up on you. People don't realize how stressful you can see now as an observer. I can see what other people used to see in me, the incredible tiredness, the fact that you're almost at the end of your tether at times. If I got 3 hours sleep a night, some nights, I was doing okay. What worried me really was falling asleep at Fairley traffic lights and then waking up as people coming up from Fairley were honking their horns at me because I was creeping across. This is the sort of support that we need to give people in the community. And it can only be given by people who can recognize the dangers. This isn't acute hospital care. This is care in the community. And it's very important that it's given. And to have nothing between the GP and the memory service confirmation is completely wrong. We also have guest speakers from time to time. We keep it, we vary it hugely. But it's a fundamental tenet of the cafes that the dementia journey is faced together as a group. And those already diagnosed find it useful to know why they are experiencing these things. And particularly the carers begin to understand why wife is acting like this or mum is behaving like that. There's a reason for it, and we can explain, we can give the reason instead of leaving people totally ignorant of what's going on. It also reinforces the knowledge that we're all in this together, because that's our motto of the cafe. We're all in the same boat, and people will know and very quickly appreciate the fact that they come into the cafes. It's a nice environment. Everybody knows each other. We all wear name badges, and depending on which cafe you go to, you always get a good slice of cake, usually homemade, and it's a really nice social event. But the idea is not to provide a social setting. What makes us different is that we have an educational input, and that is at the heart of what we do. The majority of people with dementia have Alzheimer's, and as behavioral patterns with the most prevalent types are very similar, this provides the basis of a four-stage model that we base our dementia awareness sessions on. Won't go into that now, but it's a very important part of our awareness program. It's not a medical model. It's a behavioural model. The social aspect is also important, and the volunteers play an integral part in creating a friendly, calm, and homely atmosphere. However, the educational aspect is so important. It's not unusual for people to attend a number of cafes or travel, particularly to hear a special topic being discussed. Last week, Dr. Legg offered to do a question and answer session on dementia. And of course, it went out on our website and on social media, and the place was packed. We had to bring in extra chairs and tables. And we had to run on cakes and cups of tea. It was a really interesting session. She did well. She's one of our good advocates. And I've got a lot of time for Michelle. But she's overworked. And she also dealt with the thorny questions, the non-dementia questions, like, why can't I get an appointment when I want one at the doctor's? She handled the whole situation beautifully. It's essential that what we say to people is accurate. I've already said that. And it doesn't matter what cafe you go to, the format is the same. But they all have their own distinct characteristics. I know with my wife, I first visited West Cowes because I met one of the volunteers in East Cowes where I was living, and she said, "Oh, bring Ruth over to Cowes tomorrow. We've got the cafe at the Masonic Hall." And I thought, well, I'm not so sure about this. You know, dementia, Alzheimer's, it's early days. How's she going to take it? Because my wife was a feisty Portsmouther, Portsmouthian, I guess I should say, and she had a very strong will. She loved it. As soon as we went in, I think Floss had tipped off the volunteers. A couple of them, Julian and Liz, descended and made a fuss of her. Off she went, and I was led away to have a cup of tea and a sandwich or whatever. And it was a very pleasant experience and relaxing. That's the important thing. You know, I was particularly stressed at the time, didn't realise it. Of course, carers don't, do they? But it was lovely to sit down and not have to worry about where Ruth was. If she wanted to go to the loo, there were umpteen people who would be able to take her. And not only that, she liked them all. And they chatted about all sorts of things. And it was a really nice experience. So I thought, oh, on to a good one here, Chapman. Where else are the cafes? And I realised that Newport was another one that we could go to. And they did a supper. And in those days, we could have a glass of red or white with it. Can't do that now because we're in the Methodist Hall. But in those days, we were in the CV one at St John's, and they're a bit more tolerant. And it was great. We used to thoroughly enjoy it. Then I thought, oh, where can we go for a really good drive? And where else but Totland? And do you know, Totland make the most delicious lemon drizzle cakes. And when I do a presentation there now, I always mention that I shall be, oh, I'll see you next month because I'm at your place. And they always have a lemon drizzle cake, homemade, of course. And I usually end up taking a bit home with me as well. And it's a delightful place. Every cafe has its own characteristic. I'm particularly interested in East Cowes because that's the one that I started with Lizzie Pearson, and I also help out at Sandown. And by golly, Sandown lot are feisty. We have some fun and games there, I can tell you. We used to have a cafe in Ventnor, but we just lost numbers and it wasn't viable. But I used to think on a February evening, well, I don't fancy this, that blowing a hoolie, temperature down to nearly zero, raining. You know, where's the worst place to be on the Isle of Wight? On the south coast, next to the cop shop in Ventnor. And I used to think, oh, do I need this? Do I really need this? And I'd come away feeling, do you know what? I'm on a high. It's almost as though I've had a drug infusion because even though we may have only had maybe 5 or 6 people there, we had a wonderful exchange of communication. And I met some really, really interesting people. I met a chap who served on HMS Vanguard, which was my father-in-law's ship in the Navy, where he was chief gunnery officer. And David was one of the ratings. And of course, we had that connection. Now, you could ask David what he had for lunch, and he wouldn't know. But we could talk about parts of his experience in the Navy on Vanguard for hours on end. And his wife used to say to me, I don't know how you get him going. I said, you know, you haven't got the gift, obviously. So each one's different. Well, nearly towards the end, promise you, but I have to mention the Dementia Awareness Partnership because this has grown out of the cafes. It's a part of the cafes. It's a very important part. It's like the outreach program, and we go out to members of the community. It's currently commissioned by Adult Social Care to provide courses to all CQC registered organisations across the island free of charge. And boy, are we busy. I could give you statistics, but I can't remember where I put them. We've got lots going on at the moment. There's Maggie is doing a presentation tomorrow. I'm due to be doing one as well. Well, here, there, and everywhere. It's been operating for about 5 years, and it's already developed training in cooperation with the hospital's own education department. Some of you may have seen me appearing in 1 or 2 of the films. Get me out of here is one that everyone remembers. And the other day I met a person who said, oh, I know you. Where have I met you? And of course she'd seen me on film at one of the education lectures. So all tier 1 newly employed at the trust go through the trust's own initiation program, and part of that is the dementia awareness that we've developed together with them, and of course Gemma Jones, who keeps a very close eye on what we do. What else are we doing? Well, we've done a lot of training with the social workers, Age UK, and the dementia navigators, Southern Housing. A lot of their staff has done. Oh, there's loads of it. HMP, some very interesting work going on there. I mean, can you imagine having to cope with dementia in an institution like the prisons? Boy, they've got problems and no money. I mean, who's got money nowadays? We've done quite a lot of work with Mountbatten, a variety of local community groups, and the local constabulary have just asked that we do some dementia awareness training with them. So, statistics, well, population of the island, you all know this, 141,606 at the last census in 2019. So 140,000 people, it's quite a lot, isn't it? In the summer, it doubles. And that also means that we have with us on holiday quite a few people with dementia. And I've met them on the boat. Another story for another time. But you know, there are a lot of people around. By 2030, well, no, at the present moment, 2,655 people over the age of 65 living on the island with dementia. That was in 2021. By 2030, it's estimated to be 3,920. Now, the Alzheimer's Society, when they do their statistics, reckon there's probably about 40% more that have never been diagnosed. We actually have one of the best diagnosed areas in the UK. That's about all we can say we're doing well. So we could have by 2030 well over 4,000, 4,500 perhaps people with dementia. That's an awful lot. The island has the largest prevalence of dementia in the UK, and numbers are expected to grow for the next 25 years. Why 25 years? Well, when you think about it, that's by that time the population was settled after the boomer period of the war. So it's a problem that isn't going to go away. And if we want to, we can just turn our head away and say, well, it's done nothing to do with me, which is to a certain extent what happened to me until about 15 years ago. My family have never had close links with people living with dementia. I don't know what it was all about. I know a bit more now, though. But I mean, I meet people. I met a retired social worker the other day, and he said, all my years of working, I never thought for one moment that she'd get dementia, his wife. And I said, well, we don't actually know what's around the corner. You know, if you're over 65, I think it's 1 in 14 chances of you getting dementia. When you're over 80, it's 1 in 4. And the only way you can avoid that is not to make the age of 80. But less said about that, the better, I think, don't you? So what about the next step? Well, I mentioned Parklands just now. It's our new day centre. It's going to be the very first in the UK that is an Alzheimer cafe daily. Initially, it'll be 5 days a week. Eventually, it'll be 7 days a week. The heart of the place will be the cafe, and it will be a physical cafe. And together, it will incorporate well-being centre, makeup, exercise, activities, and so on. A place where people can come together, meet socially, feel at ease, and where everybody there is in the same boat. People are very, very loath to admit that they've got a problem. Gosh, I wish I had £1 for every time. A keen golfer has said to me latterly that they've given up golf because they couldn't cope with the scoring, and people were getting onto them about not being accurate in their score, so they stopped going to golf. My own sister, she had a brain tumor which produces similar symptoms. Used to be an avid bell ringer in her local church, and she stopped going. And it was only when she was at the funeral I mentioned to the vicar the reason, and the reason was because she couldn't put up with the sort of snippets of conversation that Annette's not got a sense of rhythm. She's lost this and she's losing it, and she was embarrassed, and it mortified the vicar, absolutely mortified. Well, it would do, wouldn't it? I guess. So it's important that we've got somewhere that people can come to on a daily basis. No sort of booking up required. Just drop in. Obviously, if they're going to go to an activity, it needs booking up. But everybody who will work there will be dementia aware. And so, thank you, Isle of Wight Council, for that, your generosity in giving us a wonderful building, as you can see, top left. And the architects have got to work and shown us what it can do. But we've got to raise a bit of money in the meantime. I don't know whether this is going to work. If it does, it's a bonus. Yes. It's only a couple of minutes, I promise.
I don't think we'll be able to see it, Barry. I think
dear,
you have to change screen somehow.
Yeah, okay.
Which is a little bit more complex and is out of my field a little bit.
I'll skip it. If you go onto our website, you can see this. So who organises this? So, well, there's the band of brothers and sisters there. 6 trustees. Maggie is not a trustee. I'm not a trustee. There's the 6 coordinators. All of the trustees are coordinators or volunteers at one or more of the cafes, and what I'd like your contribution to be is signpost the cafes, please. Help us to support islanders face to face. We're not on the end of the phone. We are real people with faces and real voices. And we're an island charity for island people. And we rely on the support of over 50 trained volunteers committed to a partnership of care. So follow us in the local press and on social media. Even maybe think about becoming a volunteer. So that, in a bit of a nutshell, is what the cafes are all about. I hope I haven't bored you by giving you a PowerPoint death. I had one of those a couple of weeks back, and I tell you, they're awful. But we are busy, and that's who we are. So thanks for being patient.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much, Barry. I thought that was amazing. I mean, there are the details there. And what I'll do is I'll stop recording now. This will be on our Community Action website. So type in Community Action Isle of Wight, put in health in the search bit, and it will take you to our page. Scroll down for Lunch and Learns. Okay, stop recording.